I welcome you all to the module 9. So the module 9 is about social behavior, and today's lecture is lecture number 25, and it is titled as group processes. So before we talk about today's lecture, let me give you a brief recap of the last lecture. So the last lecture, which was lecture number 24, was also the part of the same module, that is social behavior. So in the last lecture we discussed the concept of social influence. So in that context we discussed what are the different forms of social influence, starting from conformity, compliance and obedience. So we discussed the different research findings, the different factors that influences all this, specifically conformity, obedience and compliance. In today's lecture we will focus on the concept of group performance and group decision making. So influence was about how the presence of other influence you. In today's lecture it will focus on performance. When you perform something or when you want to make decisions in the presence of other people or in the social context, how we are influenced by that. So we will talk about these two particular concepts, group performance and group decision making. So more specifically we will talk about under group performance social facilitation, social inhibition, social loafing, and under decision making we will talk about the concept of group polarization and group think. So let us start today's lecture. So when we talk about group processes, the idea is that ways in which people think, feel and behave when they are part of a group, and how group interaction influence individuals and outcomes. So whenever we work under a group or within a group system, group of people, then our behavior also, there are certain aspects of our behavior which changes, particularly our behavior, thoughts and emotions. So we'll talk about that, how group situation influences us. So we'll more specifically discuss under group processes, the group performance and group decision making, how our performance is influenced and how our decision making is influenced. So let's start with the concept of group performance, how our performance of any action or any task that we do in a group situation, how is it different when we do it individually. So group performance, it refers to how the presence of others affects an individual's performance on task. Okay. So that's the simple thing. Let's say in comparison to when you are doing alone and when you are doing something in a group situation, how they are different. Social psychologists have found that people do not always perform the same way when they are alone versus when they are in a group. Sometimes performance improves while in other situation declines. So when we perform in a group situation or in the presence of other people, sometimes our performance increases, sometimes it decreases, depending on the situation that we will talk about, as compared to when we are doing alone. So the performance could be a little different. Now in this context of group performance, we will talk about three important concepts. One is social facilitation, another is social inhibition, and the third one is social loafing. Let us look into each of these. These are all related to the performance. Now social facilitation means what? It refers to the improvement of performance when other people are present, particularly when the task is simple, well learned and practiced. So facilitation as a term means improvement in performance. So in many situations when others are present, the performance of an individual actually increases. So that's called social facilitation. So it's an increase in performance when others are around you, when you are performing a task. Now it happens in a certain condition that we will talk about. Particularly this is more relevant or more evident when the task is simple, well learned and well practiced. So we'll look into that. So this is a situation where performance increases in the presence of others, then we call it as a social facilitation. Now the presence of others sometimes motivates individuals to perform better, increasing effort, alertness and concentration. In certain context, when others are around you, it increases your motivation to perform better, it increases your effort that you put into the actions, it increases your alertness, concentration and so on. Now this does not happen all the time, but in certain condition when this happens, then it is called social facilitation. The concept of social facilitation, it originated from the work of social psychologist Norman Triplett in somewhere 1898. How did he find this phenomena? He found that while examining bicycle racing records, Triplett observed that cyclists perform better when competing against others when they are racing as compared to when they are racing alone. So, he observed that cyclists particularly, they perform much better in terms of speed and so on when they are competing with other people as compared to when they are just on their own, they are cycling or racing alone. Racing alone means they are trying best to speed up and so on, but when they do the same thing in competition with other people around them, then actually they perform much better. So, this was his observation, and that led to the development of this concept called social facilitation. So, he wanted to test this. So, to test this was his observation. So, to test his observation, he conducted an experiment which children were asked to turn a fishing reel as quickly as possible, either alone or in the presence of other child performing the same task. So, just to confirm his observation or hypothesis, he did an experiment with the children. What he did? So, he measured performance of children. What was the performance? Turning of fishing reel. So, when we catch fish, so there is a fishing reel that is used to catch the fish, and you can turn it with a certain speed and so on. So, turning of fishing reel, so they were instructed to as quickly as possible they should turn it in two conditions. One was when they are alone, in another condition when other children were also performing the same task. So, one was alone, one was in a group situation. What he found, the result showed that many children worked faster when another person was present, or something called as co-action was there. Others were also doing the same task and you were also one of the participants. Then your performance was much better. Researcher also found that the presence of passive audience, not just co-actors, could improve performance also. For instance, students solved multiplication problem faster when the audience were present. So, when we say the presence of others, there could be two conditions. Okay? So, presence of others could be okay. One could be like co-actors, one could be just audience. Okay. So, presence of others could be in these two conditions. One is others are also doing the same task and you are also one of the participants. So, this like co-actors are present. They are also doing the same task and you are also one of the person. Audience means you are performing, others are looking at you. So, that is the audience. So, the research shown in both the condition, many times depending on the nature of the task, the social facilitation can happen and the person can perform better in both the condition when co-actors are present and also when audience are also present. So, this is one thing. So, this is called as social facilitation. So, in a certain context, performance becomes better in the presence of others, either as a co-actors or as a audience. Now, there is another concept called social inhibition. Now, here many times opposite can also happen. So, that is called as social inhibition. What is happening here? Later research shows that the presence of others does not always improve performance. So, it is not necessary that when others are present and when we are performing a task, it will not always lead to better performance. So, that is a conditional thing. So, in some cases accuracy actually decreases even though speed increases. Whenever we are doing a certain task, sometimes accuracy increases but speed decreases and so on, or both speed and accuracy decline also sometimes when others are present. This negative effect of social presence is known as social inhibition. So, many times the presence of other can actually deteriorate your performance. So, that is why it is called social inhibition. Earlier it was facilitation, so it was improving. Here it is decreasing your performance. So, social inhibition occurs when the presence of others interfere with the performance, especially when the task is difficult, unfamiliar and complex. Now, especially when you are doing a task which is difficult, complex, unfamiliar and you are not properly trained in it, then presence of other actually decreases your performance. And in case of social facilitation, it happens mostly in the case of tasks which are familiar, easy and you are trained and practiced in it, then actually facilitation happens. So, it depends on the condition or the nature of the task that you are doing. That will determine whether facilitation happens or inhibition happens. So, instead of improving performance, the presence of observers may create anxiety or self-consciousness which actually disrupt performance. So, when the tasks are difficult, unfamiliar or complex, then actually the presence of other actually may create more anxiety and more self-consciousness which will actually decrease your performance. Now, we have kind of touched upon the explanations why this happens, but let us delve more deep into it. How do you explain why social facilitation happens and why inhibition happens? Now, researcher actually showed that impact of others depends on the task difficulty. So, that is the main important factors which decides whether facilitation happens or inhibition happens. It depends on the task difficulty. The presence of co-actors or audience improves performance on simple and well-learned tasks, but impairs performance on complex and poorly learned tasks. So, that is the basic idea. So, when you are doing a task which is simple, you are well learned, you are more expert in it, then presence of other actually increase the performance. But when you are doing a task which is complex and you also are not poorly, you are also like poorly learned, you are not properly trained in it, then the inhibition happens in the presence of other people. Now, there are two theories which explains this, what happens psychologically when others are present and why sometimes facilitation happens and why sometimes inhibition happens. Two specific theories can explain this. One is called drive theory, another is called as attention based explanation. So, let us look into these two explanations. So, the drive theory explanation, how do we explain these two phenomena? Say presence of others, in one case performance increases, in another case performance decreases. So, this one of the explanation given by this drive theory which was proposed by Robert Young through drive theory. What he said, according to this theory, the presence of others increases physiological arousal which strengthens the dominant response. So, when others are present, people get physiologically aroused. So, your system becomes more active because others are looking at you or others are there in kind of judging you. Then physiological arousals, body system becomes more active, like your breathing, your breathing rate will increase, you may start sweating and so on. These are all indicators of physiological arousals. Now, this theory says this physiological arousal is actually good for dominant response. If you are good at some kind of response, then it will actually enhance that dominant response. For simple or well learned task, the dominant response is usually correct. So, when the task is simple, well learned, you are good at it, so physiological arousal will actually increase the performance, it will make it better. So, this leads to social facilitation. But what happens in the case of complex or unfamiliar task, the dominant response is often incorrect. So, whenever you do a complex unfamiliar task, generally you make a lot of mistakes. So, in the presence of other, this probability of making mistake will actually increase, because your dominant response in this case is making more mistakes. Complex task when you do, you are likely to make mistakes. So, that is your dominant response, making mistakes. So, in presence of other, it will amplify that. So, you are likely to make more mistakes. In case of well learned simple tasks, your dominant response is you will do it perfectly. So, when others are present, your perfection will actually increase. So, that is what happens. So, the dominant response is often incorrect, so performance becomes worse. So, that can explain why social inhibition happens. So, experimental evidence supports this idea. For example, people learned simple maze faster, but complex maze more slowly when the audience are present. So, experimental evidence also proves this theory. So, this could be one of the explanation why under certain conditions social facilitation happens and under certain conditions social inhibition happens. Another concept which can also, or theory which can kind of explain this both the phenomena, is attention based explanation. So what happens here? So this theory of distraction conflict theory, which was proposed by Robert Barron, which says the presence of others can divide attention between the task and the audience, creating a state of distraction and mental overload. So when others are present, your attention gets divided. A part of attention is on the task and part of attention goes to the audience who are looking at you. So there is a division of attention. Now this narrowed attention can help performance in simple tasks, because when you are doing simple tasks, narrow attention, small part of attention is good enough to perform, because you need to focus on only very few things, because it is simpler and you are expert in it. But it can impair performance on complex tasks that require attention on many things, because you are not familiar, you are not very expert in this, you need lot of attention. But since presence of other, your attention is divided, so you are not able to put your best full attention in the task, because a part of attention is going into the audience. So because it unfamiliar complex task requires a lot of attention and your attention is divided, so your performance decreases. So this is another explanation. So these are two concepts which shows how performance is influenced in the social situation or the group situations. Another concept which is also related to performance is called as social loafing. What is this? Social loafing refers to tendency of individuals to exert less effort when working in a group than when working alone. Many times when people work in a group, they put less effort as compared to when they work alone. This phenomena is called as social loafing. So it is more about how much effort you put in the task in a group situation or when you are alone. So earlier two concepts are related to directly performance. Here it is also related to performance, but it is more about how much effort you put. So this is phenomena is called social loafing. People tend to give less effort when they are working in a group situation. Now when responsibility for completing a task is shared among several members, individuals may feel that their personal contribution is less noticeable or less important, which leads to reduction in effort. What happens when you are working in a group? So your effort may not be directly visible, because everybody is contributing and there is a outcome that is done by the group itself, not just XYZ. So your responsibility is kind of diffused, there is no direct responsibility. So you think even if I put less effort, it does not matter, because others will be doing, and anyway as a group the things will be done, because the responsibility of completing this task is shared among everybody. You are not alone responsible for it. But when you are given a responsibility alone, you have to do it everything on your own. So you will put more effort. But when it is divided among group members, you are likely to put less effort. And in many times some few people will put maximum effort and others will not put that effort. So that reducing effort in a group situation is called as social loafing. So this phenomena occurs particularly when individual performance cannot be easily identified or evaluated. So this also again happens in certain conditions, particularly when individual performance is not tracked. Only you are interested in the output of the product. So as a group, what you have done, but who has contributed how much is not looked at. So people will not feel responsible. So that is what happens. Many people within the group will put much less effort. So especially when individual performance cannot be identified or evaluated, then the social loafing happens more. This phenomena is actually came from another concept called as Ringelmann effect. So one of the earliest demonstration of the social loafing was done by this Maximilien Ringelmann, a French agricultural engineer. So he first reported this concept of social loafing, therefore it is also called as Ringelmann effect. In 1913, Ringelmann conducted an experiment involving men pulling on a rope. He measured pulling force exerted by individuals and then compared it to the force exerted when they pulled in groups. So pulling of rope task was given. In certain condition, individually alone they were pulling that rope. In another condition, a group of people were pulling the rope collectively, you know. So, and he measured the force, how much force is exerted by you in both the conditions, when they are alone, when they are in a group. Ringelmann asked participants to pull on a rope either alone or in a group and measure the force exerted. What he found, that when individuals pulled alone, they exerted maximum effort when they were asked to put it because they are alone. So, they gave all the effort because then they are directly visible, whatever is going to come, it will be directly, you know, connected to their effort. So, they are putting whatever possible effort they can do. As group size increased, the average effort per person decreased. He found when the more and more people were collectively pulling the rope, each individual's effort would decrease actually. So, that is the phenomenon of social loafing. This reduction in individual's effort as a group size increases as known as Ringelmann effect. So, this effect also shows the concept of social loafing. Some experimental studies were also done on this concept of social loafing. One such study was done by Bibb Letne, Williams and Harkins in 1979. This was a classic experiment where group shouting behavior was used to see this concept of social loafing. What was the procedure done? So, participants were asked to shout and clap as loudly as possible under different conditions. So, participants were put into different conditions and their task was one thing, they need to shout and clap as loud as possible. Conditions were, when in one condition they are alone, they have to do it, shout and clap. Another condition, in group of 2, it was another condition. So, 2 individuals together they have to shout and clap. In another condition, it was group of 4 individuals. So, 4 individuals were supposed to shout and clap as loud as possible, and the last condition was in a group of 6 individuals together they need to shout and clap as loudly as possible. The participants were blindfolded and wore headphones, so they could not judge others' contribution. So, all were blindfolded and headphones were put, so they cannot just, you know, hear how much others are shouting, or they cannot see others, you know. So, that was the condition. What he found, the result, the average noise produced per person decrease in group size increased. When they understood they are in a group, their effort actually decreased as compared to when alone they were shouting and clapping. So, this also clearly showed the social loafing phenomena. Why this happens? Why social loafing happens? What could be the possible reasons? Some of the possible reasons include, one is called as diffusion of responsibility. So, that is the main thing why, you know, people reduce their effort. When many people share responsibility for a task, each person feels less personally responsible for the outcome, because when you feel 5-6 people are doing something, so it is not individually, one is not responsible. Responsibility is on all people. So, individual responsibility decreases and it becomes like a group kind of responsibility. So, each individual feels less responsible, so they put less effort. So, that is called diffusion of responsibility. Second is lack of evaluation. In a group situation, each individual is not evaluated. So, total outcome is evaluated. So, when one is not evaluated, they are less likely to put effort. So, if individuals' contributions are not monitored or evaluated, people may feel there is no need to work hard. Anyway, others will do, and together something will happen. So, I do not have to put so much effort. So, that lack of evaluation also decreases the performance. 3 is free ride effect. Another reason, some individuals, this happens mostly whenever form any group, there will be some individual who intentionally rely on others to complete the work while contributing little themselves. This happens in most of the cases. If you form any type of group, there will be some individual in that group who will put least effort, and they will depend on other people in the group to do everything, and they will just take the free ride. So, their effort automatically decreases. The fourth reason why social loafing happens is called dispensability of effort. What does that mean? People may feel their individual contribution will not significantly affect the outcome, especially in a large group. Whenever the people in a large group they work, they think my own contribution is not that significant. Even if I do not do, still the things will be done. So, my individual effort will not make much impact. So, they reduce the effort. The fifth reason is reduced motivation. When rewards are shared equally among group members, individuals may feel less motivated to exert maximum effort. They feel anyway it is going to be a group outcome, whatever reward they are going to get, it will be shared among all. So, I do not have to put all the effort, let others also do the effort. So, kind of the motivation is motivation decreases for a lot of people. So, this could be some of the possible reasons why social loafing happens. Now, in certain conditions, social loafing is much stronger as compared to certain situations where it is much less. So, again everything depends on the context and the situation. So, when social loafing is stronger, when group size is larger. So, as the group becomes larger and larger, each individual feels less responsible, they put less effort. So, social loafing is more. When individual contributions are not identifiable, when you cannot just identify who has done how much, no one is looking at or evaluating each individual's performance, then social loafing is more likely to happen. When tasks are uninteresting or routine, especially this happens when people in a group, they are doing something uninteresting or very routine kind of task, then the social loafing is also more likely to happen, because their engagement will be less. Another situation, group members do not know each other well, especially when strangers work together, then obviously loafing is more likely to happen. And individual's effort has little impact on outcomes. When individual effort may not be directly related to outcome, then also social loafing is more likely to happen. So, these are the conditions under which social loafing is stronger. Just the opposite condition will lead to social loafing will be reduced, in the opposite conditions. For example, when individual contributions are identifiable, even though as a group you are doing, but there will be evaluation of each individual's how much you have done, then obviously social loafing will not happen, or it will be much reduced, because then my individual how much I am doing will be evaluated, then social loafing will decrease. When group members feel personally responsible, when even though it is done in the group situation, but each individual will have separate individual responsibility, X person has to do this, Y person has to do this, then individual responsibility is specifically defined, then social loafing is less likely to happen. When tasks are meaningful or important, generally when meaningful, interesting tasks are there, everybody generally contributes. So, then engagement is more, social loafing is less likely to happen. When group members work closely together, when everybody closely work together, then everybody contributes. When the performance is evaluated individually, as we already said, then loafing is less likely to happen, because then I cannot avoid, my performance will be individually judged even though it is a group work, then social loafing reduces. So, it depends on the context also, social loafing may not happen equally in every situation. So, this was about performance. So, in a social situation or in a group situation, performance may increase, decrease depending on the various context and factors that we have discussed. Now, let us come to the concept of group decision making. When we are in a group situation, so many times we make decision individually in our own life, and many times when we have to make decisions as a group, as a team, how it is different from the individual decision making. So, let us look into this part. So, group decisions making refers to processes through which members of a group collectively analyze information, discuss alternatives and drives a decision. So, when as a group collectively you have to make a decision. Okay? So, that is a group decision making. That group could be very small group, large group and so on. It could be 2 individual group, it could be 5 people in a group, or it could be a whole society as a group, it could be whole country as a group. Right? So, the unit and the size could vary. So, group often makes decision in organizations, governments, committees, juries, teams and so on. There are many situations everywhere, decisions are taken as a group in every organizations. While group decision making can lead to better ideas because more people are involved, many times it can lead to better ideas because many people are putting their inputs, information and sharing. It can also produce systematic biases. Many times group decision can be erroneous or it may lead to a lot of errors also. Sometimes it may lead to better judgment because a lot of people are putting their mind in a decision. You are alone, only your thoughts are there. When many people are there, many people are giving ideas, so it may improve the decisions. But that same situation can also create a problem in terms of when group of people decisions could be biased. It can lead to a lot of errors also. So we will look into that. So two important phenomena that influence group decision. So we will talk about, in this context of group decision, two important phenomena we will look at. One is called as a group polarization and another is called as a group think. So let us look into these two concepts through which we will understand how decision making is influenced in a group situation. So the group polarization, what is this? So group polarization, it refers to tendency for group discussion to lead members to adopt more extreme position in the direction of their initial attitudes. Polarization means what? So let's say as a group, one group they are trying to make a decision, and the group member had an initial view about a particular issue, whatever issue that is. Okay. Now when they discuss, after discussion the group decisions become more polarized. Whatever decision they had, it becomes more extreme. Then it is called group polarization. Okay. Instead of producing moderate opinions, discussion often strengthen views that group members are already hold. Whatever it generally happens when people have already some ideas and everybody seems to be on the same page and they discuss, and actually the same initial position become more extreme. They go in the extremes of that decision. Initially they may have some mild ideas and something, but after discussion it becomes more extreme. So that is called group polarization. Group polarization, what happens? It does not change the direction of attitudes. Whatever attitude they had, it becomes more extreme. It does not change the direction. Then it is called group polarization, and it intensifies it. It becomes more extreme. For example, what if group members initially hold mildly favorable views towards gun control? Let's say as a government, some body is trying to make policies about gun control in a country. So they had mildly favorable views, they need to control and so on. Now group decision, let's say most of the people are of the similar views. Group discussion tends to make the more supportive and more extreme views. Conversely, they become, so that support becomes much stronger. Initially they had mild views, then when group discussion happens, the support for gun control becomes very extreme and very strong. Conversely, the opposite can also happen. If the members initially oppose the gun control, discussion may tend to make them more strongly opposed. So that is the meaning of group polarization. So initial view become more extreme in the same direction, not in the opposite. So that's called group polarization. So in other words, what happens when people discuss an issue with others who share similar kind of opinions? So this happens mostly when others also have similar opinions. The group's final decision becomes more extreme in the same direction they initially had. So overall, group polarization demonstrate how group discussion can actually amplify existing attitudes rather than moderate them, leading the groups to adopt more extreme collective decisions. So many times people, when they discuss in a group, their initial views become more extreme. So that is called group polarization. For example, in many online communities, social media groups where members share similar beliefs can lead to increasingly radical viewpoints. So a lot of people, when they start discuss, they had certain views, and in a group or online communities, when they discuss comments and so on, they become more radical. Whatever views they have, they become more radical, more amplified and so on. This is very commonly happens in a lot of groups, and particularly the online groups and discussions and so on. So that's called group polarization, and it happens typically when people are of similar view and similar type of people in the group. Why this happens? What is the mechanism behind this? Two major processes help us to explain this. One is conformity and desire for affiliation. So conformity, that we discussed in the last lecture, that there is a kind of unwritten rule, or there is an expectations or the norms of a situation, and you tend to yield to that norms. So that's the conformity, you tend to just comply with that. So individuals often want to fit with the majority of the group. when most members lean on a particular direction, others may agree with them and even adopt more extreme position to demonstrate that they are committed to the group. When they are alone, they may have certain mild views, but when they are group, they have seen just to become part of that group or a good member of that group, they will have more extreme views, because everybody is saying a similar thing, they will put it more extreme to become a group good members. So generally that extreme take more extreme position for the increasing the affiliation of that group. Okay? And also there is a pressure of conformity. So additionally, people tend to associate the like-minded individuals which reinforces existing beliefs, because you have a certain belief and other people are also having similar beliefs. So like-minded people, but when they meet together and discuss, the same belief become more extreme, because everybody reinforces those ideas. Increases confidence in those beliefs and reduces exposure to opposite views. So you become more confident about your beliefs because other people are also having the same views. So you become more extreme. So that is one reason why group polarization happens. Second reason is for exposure to persuasive arguments. When people have the similar views, they argue, you also get to know a lot of arguments in favor of that and or against it, whatever it is, and that argument makes your views more extreme. So group discussion introduces new arguments supporting existing attitude, whatever you have. Hearing additional reasons for the position can strengthen people's beliefs and push them towards more extreme attitudes. Their beliefs may become much more stronger because other people are giving a lot of arguments that even they are not aware, and so their position becomes much more stronger and extreme. So that could be also another reason why group polarization happens. So this was one thing. The next concept which is related to group decision making is called as groupthink. What is that? So the presence of others can strongly influence decision making, as seen in the conformity studies of Solomon Asch, where individuals often choose group harmony over accuracy. As we have seen in the last lecture, in that line matching experiment of Solomon Asch, that people just to conform with other people, they just yield to the wrong answer simply because a lot of other people said or gave wrong answer. Okay? So that is also kind of reflection of the group think. So similarly, what happens when group members suppress dissenting opinions in order to maintain unity and cohesion, the groups may fall into groupthink. So groupthink means, as a group, your more preference is to make an unanimous decision and simply neglect the minority views, because if you follow minority views, probably you will not be able to take decisions. So you take the majority views to come to a quick unanimous decision for the sake of making that decision. Then this phenomenon is called groupthink, and it may lead to a lot of errors and irrational decisions. We will look into that. So that phenomenon is called groupthink. So groupthink refers to flawed decision making. Mostly this is used in the context of flawed decision making or decisions with errors, in which the desires for group cohesion and agreement overrides the evaluation of the ultimate. So desire for cohesion and making a collectively unanimous decision becomes more important than actually making right decision. So that leads to something called as a groupthink. This was introduced by the psychologist named Irving Janis, who argued that this process has contributed to several major historical decision makings and errors in the decision making. This phenomena is very prominent in many decisions of big countries, and most of those decisions were very wrong decisions because they wanted to have an unanimous decisions and they did something which was not right. So let us look into some examples. So the groupthink phenomena, we will look into some of these examples. Groupthink situation, members prioritize agreement and harmony over critical thinking. So they are not more interested into making an agreement and unanimous decision, and they give less focus on critical thinking and minority views, which results in poor decision making. So under what condition this becomes more prominent? When groupthink may not happen in every group situations, but generally it happens more when certain conditions are present. One is, groups are highly cohesive, means everybody are of the connected to each other in a very positive way, cohesive, then they will always make an unanimous decision and may not critically analyze the situation. When leaders are very directive and dominant, when in a group the leader is very directive and very dominant, he will put his thing first and make decisions accordingly, and other will agree because the authority is very dominant. They may not even say, a dissenting voice may not be heard, or they may not even have strength, or maybe may not have the courage to dissent. So they will make a decisions based on just unanimous or what the leader is saying, which may be wrong. And when the group is isolated from outside opinions, when group is very much in their own world and they are not looking at what other people are thinking, then they are also more likely to make wrong decisions. When decisions must be made under stress or time pressure, groupthink becomes more prominent when you have to make a very quick decision, and when the group is very strongly under pressure. So there is a time pressure. Then people are more likely to make an unanimous decision as quickly as possible without really critically thinking about it. Then this phenomena is more likely to happen. Also, this is more likely to happen when there are no clear procedure or evaluating alternatives. When there are no clear procedures or for framework for evaluating alternatives, so things are not very clear, then also people are more likely to yield to, let us say, dominant leader and so on, and they will make some decisions which may not be right and so on. So certain condition facilitates groupthink phenomena. Some of the historical examples where groupthink phenomena are very clearly evident. One was the Bay of Pigs invasion that happened in 1961. So the Bay of Pig invasion was failed US supported attempt to overthrow Fidel Castro's government in Cuba. So US kind of attacked Cuba to overthrow Fidel Castro's government. Okay. Why this is an example of groupthink phenomena? Because there was an overconfidence that the invasion would be succeed. Because when everybody is cohesive, everybody thinks as a country we can easily win this situation. They don't critically analyze the problems and so on, then just attack the other country. But then when they attack, they find the real problem. So overconfidence was one of the phenomena in this case, which led to a failed mission. Then suppression of dissent, as advisor hesitated to challenge John F. Kennedy's administration, even though some people disagreed, but that the number would be less and they did not have probably the courage to say, or even if they said, they were suppressed. So the decision, whatever is made, had a wrong outcome and so on. Also there was an illusion of unanimity, making plan appear widely supported when actually it may not be there, because few people agreed and it was an illusion that everybody agreed, which may not be the actuality of the case. Then there was a poor evaluation of risk and alternatives. That is what critical thinking was missing. If you attack, what would happen in a certain situation, what would happen if you fail and so on. So all these alternatives were not thought out about it. So that resulted in a failed invasion becoming a major political setback for the United States. So this is generally given an example for groupthink phenomena. Another example was Challenger space shuttle disaster. The space shuttle Challenger, this was a mission of NASA which occurred when the space shuttle Challenger, that was the name of the shuttle called Challenger, which exploded shortly after the launch. This was the NASA's mission, manned mission. There are people in that space shuttle and they are going to space, but it was a failed mission because it exploded shortly after the launch. So what happened here? Why this happened? So certain groupthink features were present. One was the pressure to maintain the launch schedule at NASA. So one thing was that for launching this particular shuttle, they were under pressure because many deadlines were missed and so on. Whatever it is, there was certain time pressure. They were supposed to launch it. So as we have seen, under pressure, when people group make certain decisions, generally groupthink phenomena is likely to happen. Then there was an ignoring of engineers' warning about O-ring failure in cold temperature. Some engineers actually, they reported that there could be possibility of certain failure of certain component called O-ring in that shuttle under cold temperature, but because they were supposed to launch it and majority agreed, and so minority opinions were neglected, and that this was the reason why it was failed actually. So because others people that did not listen to that engineer's suggestions. Then rationalization of risk to proceed with launch. They minimized the importance of the risk and they proceeded. Then there was a limited consideration of dissenting opinions, because for example, so the engineers' opinions were not heard properly and addressed. What was the result? The shuttle exploded shortly after the liftoff, killing all 7 crew members. All 7 crew members who were there all died. This is also given as a classic example of groupthink phenomena, overconfidence and so on, and this illusion of unanimously taking decision, it failed. And many such cases happened across countries when people, under stress or overconfidence take decision as a group, which turn out to be a disaster. So what is the strategies to prevent groupthink? Organizations and any group situation, they should follow certain strategies to reduce this, because this can lead to erroneous decisions. One is encouraging open discussion and criticism. This is something very important, and leaders' role is also plays very important role in this. Rather than just coming to a unanimous decision immediately, focus should also be given that there should be an open discussion and criticism, and whoever is saying what, at least if something is important, should be listened. Assigning a devil's advocate to challenge ideas. So even if some ideas are very good, let us play devil's advocate to find out, can these ideas have some problems, or what is the counter argument, and so on. Seeking outside opinion. Sometimes in a group everybody feels like this is right, but if you can take someone's ideas who are from outside, they may give a fresh perspective. Dividing large groups into smaller independent teams sometimes is also helpful. When as a large group they take decision, groupthink is more likely to happen, but if you split it into small groups and each groups will take decisions, and then collectively you find out what is the best decisions. That is also a good strategy. Having leaders avoid stating preferences early. When the group leader in the beginning they tell their preferences, other people will agree on that. So if they avoid that, rather than collectively group members take a decision, the groupthink phenomena is less likely to happen. So these are some of the strategies one can always use as a group, as an organization, or as a country. Then obviously the groupthink phenomena is less likely to happen. So these are some of the things about group phenomena. So when we work alone and when we perform in a group, so performance may also change as compared to when we perform in alone. So we have seen the concept of how performance sometimes can increase, sometimes can decrease in a social situation or group review. Similarly, in the decision making process also, when we do it in the group setting, there may be many factors which could influence our decisions in the group setting. So these are some of the things about social phenomena, how our behavior actually changes in a social situation as compared to when we are doing the same thing alone. So this was about social behavior, some of the important dimensions of social behavior. So with this I end here. Thank you.